looking at circles, I put here on your note guide the distance formula. And so then the first prompt says to write the equation for the distance from the center of the circle to the point xy. So we're calling the center hk, and then the other point xy. So that just means in this distance formula, one of the x's is the x from the point, and one of the x's is the x from the center, which is h. So we would call this x minus h squared plus, and then same thing for the y coordinates, so we would have y minus k squared. So there's our distance formula written with those two things in mind. Now, in a circle, the distance from the center to a point on the circle is the radius. And we use r to represent this. So we are going to rewrite the formula above using r as the distance from the center to xy, which means instead of d equals, our formula would say r equals. And then we would have this information. And then when we use the circle equation, generally there aren't any radicals. So in order to rewrite this equation without any radicals, we would go ahead and we would square both sides of the equation. So when we do that, we get this equation that r squared is equal to x minus h squared plus y minus k squared. That is the circle equation. Okay? And then go ahead and make a note of what each thing represents. In other words, r was the radius for us. And h comma k was the center. Okay. All right, so now knowing that, if we were going to write an equation for the circle with center at -3, -9, and a radius of 5/6 units, so our h is -3, and our k is -9, and our r is 5/6, which means that r squared is going to be 5/6 squared, which is going to be 25 over 36. So my equation for my circle is going to be 25 over 36 equals x minus -3, so that's going to look like x plus 3 squared, plus y minus -9, so that's going to look like x plus 9 squared. So then I have my equation. All right. So to graph, we basically need to find the center and use the radius to find some points around the circle and sketch it in. So with this equation, x squared plus y squared equals 144. The center here is 0, 0 because there aren't any h or k values. The radius, so r squared is equal to 144 from the equation, which means r is equal to 12. I'm not putting plus or minus 12 because I'm thinking about a distance, so our distance will be 12. So I'm going to go ahead and number this graph by 2's. So I'm going to make a point of my center here, and then if I number by 2's, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Then this would be a point on my circle because it's 12 units from the radius. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Above here would also be a point. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Over to the left would be another point, and below. And then I'm going to go ahead and sketch the circle that goes through these points. I am not very good with this, and I always end up with one kind of lopsided section of my circle, but you get the idea. So basically, we need the center and those 4 points to sketch it. All right, the other type of problem you could be given has the equation, but not in the form that you expect it to be in. So here is where our completing the square is going to come in handy. We basically want a group of x squared, and then another group of y as a perfect square, and then the constants on the other side to represent our radius. So when I look at the equation that I'm given, I have x squared minus 12x plus 84 equals negative y squared plus 16y. So these parts right here will be part of the perfect square for x, and these will be part of the perfect square for y, and this right now is the constant. So I'm going to go ahead and move things to different sides of the equation. Basically, I want the 84 on the other side, so I'm going to subtract it. And I want the y squared and the 16y on the same side with x. So balance everything out so the same thing's been done on both sides. So what I have on the left side is x squared minus 12x plus y squared minus 16y. And then on the right side, I have negative 84. So now I'm going to think about completing the square. So x squared minus 12x is part of something that I would like to factor as a perfect square. And then y squared minus 16y is part of something else I would like to factor as a perfect square. And then I have my minus 84. So in the group of the x's, x squared minus 12x, remember how to complete the square. We take that middle term of 12, negative 12, divide it by 2 and square it. So that's 6 squared, which is 36. So I want to add 36 here. And remember, since I added 36 to the left side, I want to add that same amount to the right side. Then for the perfect square with y squared minus 16y, I'm going to take 16, divide it by 2, which would be 8, and square it, which would then give me 64. And again, I added that amount to the left side, so I need to also add it to the right side. So now my perfect square with x's is x minus 6 squared. With y's, I have y minus 8 squared. And then here, I have negative 84 plus 36 plus 64. So the positives here add up to 100. And 100 plus negative 84 is going to be 16. So to plot this on my graph, this means my center is at HK. So in this case, 6, 8. And my r squared is equal to 16, which means my r is equal to 4. So I need to put a point at 6, 8 with a radius of 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And a radius of 4. Sorry, a little bit off the page. And then draw in that circle as best as we can. Okay. And so there we have that. So with those problems, we would rewrite the equation, and then we would go ahead and graph it. And if you get a radical for your radius, like the square root of 5, that's fine. Okay, the square root of 5 is 2 point something. Just approximate it on your graph, and approximate it there too. So the rest of these are similar to that, and you would continue the process you just saw us do. All right, now to write an equation for each circle with the given information. So the first one says the center is at 8, negative 9. So I immediately know my h value and my k value to plug into the equation. And I need to figure out my r. So right now I would know that x minus 8 squared plus y plus 9 squared equals r squared. Now to get the radius, you could use the distance formula on the center and the point to find out how long the radius is. Or because you know the point belongs on the circle, just like with our parabolas and with our lines, that point is an x-y pair that should be able to be plugged into this equation. So for a moment, I could plug in 21 for x while I plug in 22 for y and figure out what r squared is here. So 21 minus 8 is 13. 22 plus 9 is 31. So this is 169 plus 31 squared. Which is 961. So r squared is going to equal 1,130, which is weird, but, you know. I mean, it's not weird. The circle could have a radius that big. We probably wouldn't graph it because we'd have to have a big graph or label it a little bit differently. But notice I don't take the square root of that because in my equation I want the r squared value. So I leave the 1,130. All right. The next one says our circle has a center at negative 6, 11 and is tangent to the y-axis. So think about what this means. Your center is somewhere over here at negative 6, 11. And if your circle is tangent to the y-axis, what that means is it just hits the y-axis. Like that. Okay? What that means is there's a point on the circle on the y-axis right here, and it must be even with the center. So this distance here would be your radius. And since you know your center is at the point negative 6, 11, you know that your radius must be 6 because it's 6 units away from the axis. So then our equation is going to be x minus h, which in this case will look like x plus 6 squared, plus y minus k, which will be y minus 11 squared, equals r squared, which will be 36 when you put in the 6 squared. Okay? So the rest of the examples are like this as well. Okay? Endpoints of the diameter, so find the diameter and think about the radius. Tangent to different things, you'd have to problem solve through that. And then here's the homework. So what I want you guys to do is work with your group either on other examples if you want to before you start the homework, or you can jump right into starting this homework assignment.